Warning: this program contains images of people who are deceased.
Wild, eh?
Incredible.
It's 10 minutes past 10 on ABC Kimberley. The far north saw a lot of active service during World War II from both Allied and enemy planes. On March 20th, 1942, an RAAF plane was flying to Wyndham over the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf when the engine suddenly lost power. Pilot Sergeant Lou Dwyer and Sergeant Warwick Carmody decided to head for the coast, and they crash-landed on the mudflats near the border. The men survived the accident, and so did the Wirraway, although not for long. In the past 62 years, the plane has succumbed to salt corrosion, looting and the harsh elements. A salvage team from the Kununurra Historical Society has been working hard in recent months to preserve what's left of the plane, and now it forms a new display at the town's museum. It will be officially unveiled next week on March the 20th. Andrew Barker is intimately involved in the Wirraway Preservation Challenge. He stumbled across the wreck last year while fossicking for rocks. Andrew's also the treasurer of the Kununurra Historical Society. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm well. What did you think when you were out fossicking and you suddenly came across this discarded piece of metal?
Yes, well, at first, as we approached it, we'd been around the island, and it's actually an island on the salt marsh with trees. So we'd been around the island and came across what looked like at first a shipwreck, and as we got closer we could see the canopy frames, which were really the only thing left above the surface of the mud. So we realised that it was an aircraft, and then started doing a bit of research on it and turned up the story about A20-62.
When did you realise that it was significant, this plane?
I think pretty much straight away. We just filmed the wreck site at first. That was in September, and after only a few days, we found the story about it on, well, there's one website on the internet which showed a plane in the Territory. It's actually in WA, but it was listed as an NT crash, so it took a bit of sleuth work, but...
And where officially did it crash land, if there's this little
it's
bit
about
of...
4 k's just inside the border, so it's in WA, but only just.
And it's pretty tough country up there. I looked at it on the map, and it wouldn't be the nicest place to crash land.
No, that's for sure. And, well, after the fellas crashed, they had to walk off that salt marsh, and it would have been wet, so it wouldn't have been much fun for them, I I'm sure of that.
Andrew, tell me a bit more about the story that you have found out about what happened on March 20, 1942.
Okay, well, you've told how they came across the Gulf and got oil on the windscreen. After landing, the second Wirraway that was flying with them followed them in, and that was piloted by Black Jack Walker, who was the commanding officer of 12 Squadron.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so he followed them in and decided that he wouldn't be able to land because it was just too wet on the marsh. So he went on into Wyndham and alerted the authorities, who then contacted Carlton Hill by pedal radio. And after that, Charlie Pretlove and 4 Aboriginal stockmen from there proceeded out to Clean Skin Bore. Took them a day or two. Took the fellas 2 days to walk across just to the edge of the bush from the marsh. So if you can imagine coming down from a hill, the last hill towards the coast, and then you've got a very wide, up to 30 kilometre wide, flat salt marsh. It's more like a desert, like white, grey, sandy desert. Marsh is really a bit of a misnomer, I guess.
I wonder what they were thinking. What have you learned from talking to Lou Dwyer and Warwick Carmody?
Well, I guess after walking for 2 days across that marsh, they would have been pretty tuckered out, and they still had a journey ahead of them because from there they travelled by donkey and horse. Being the wet season, that was about the only way they could get around, and vehicles back then, well, not too many four-wheel drives back then, so it was a horse trip, donkey trip back to Ningbing Station. And, well, they survived it. So that's the beauty, is that we've been able to actually talk to these guys. And so we've learnt a lot about what happened, and we've got one of them coming up for the opening, so that should be good.
Oh, that's wonderful that you've been able to make contact. The fact that they are still alive, for starters, is a huge achievement. And what do they think about their plane, or pieces of their plane, becoming a museum piece?
Well, they're pretty happy. Actually, Lou had been here in '86, and that's one of the reasons I was able to track him down, was because he'd been here, and I'd heard from Howard Young, who years ago had mentioned this Wirraway, and after talking to Howard, I found out that Lou came here in '86 and was able to view his engine, which at that time was in one of the caravan parks. And since then it's been moved up to the RAF base in Darwin, the engine, and unfortunately at that time he couldn't get out to view the wreck because the salt marsh was just too wet. It's the sort of place you could only drive on for maybe 2 months window of opportunity in the year where you can do that. So it's really the sort of place that you just can't get to most of the time.
Very remote. So what's actually left of the plane? You mentioned that the engine is now in Darwin, and you've got a few bits and pieces. What have you got?
We've got the stainless steel canopy frames. There was 3 canopy frames, and really they were the only things that were left intact. When we first viewed it in September, there was actually other parts there. There was a manifold and some other pieces which 3 weeks later were gone. We came back to actually retrieve it after just filming it the first time, and somebody had been in and some of the pieces were already missing. So
oh, no.
Over the years, I think that's happened a lot. A lot of people, have souvenired bits and pieces. So
you were calling for some of those relics to be donated back to the museum display. Did anyone come forward and give up their...
No, unfortunately nobody has, but you never know.
It's not too late. It's not too late to donate to the museum.
That's true.
So it must be quite an exciting little display, having the stories to go with it from the pilots themselves.
That's true, and a lot of our display is focusing on these stories. We've actually started restoring the canopy frames, and we're putting new perspex in one side of the frame, and the other side will be more or less how we found it. So we'll be able to give people an idea of the condition it was in at the wreck site, because some of the perspex, for example, we found a kilometre away. So, over the years, the wreck's moved in the tide, run by the tides and the wind, I guess, and there was very little left. I mean, as I say, it was virtually all down to ground level, except for these 3 canopy frames, and all the rest are really just remnants of what was once a Wirraway.
Tell me a bit more about the Wirraways. What have you learned about them?
A lot. Well, we've had to. We've really, the Wirraway was an Australian-built plane. It was really the first mass-produced plane in Australia. They produced 755 of them, and this one was actually the 62nd. And they had a Wasp radial engine, which was a Pratt & Whitney engine, and they had a 3-bladed propeller. They had dual controls because they were built as a trainer as well, so the rear, luckily I guess for Lou, when he got oil in his face, when he opened the canopy coming across the Gulf, Carmody was able to take the stick and carry on while Lou wiped the oil from his face.
Do they know what caused the engine to pack it in?
Well, not as far as I know. There's actually, there should be a photo coming out in the Kimberley Echo today which shows quite clearly, you can see the oil all around behind the engine. And from Lou, from what I've gathered from Lou, the engine was still running. It was still windmilling and still running, but loss of power. He, by the time he got to where he did, he didn't have power enough to touch down. He was hoping to touch down and see if it was dry enough to land, and he decided to keep the wheels up and just land on the mud because he'd lost power. So as far as I know, the engine was still running, but I mean, if you lose that much oil for 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes of the flight, it had no oil, he reckoned, so it was still managing to turn over somehow.
Andrew, are you looking forward to seeing it officially unveiled on March the 20th?
Absolutely. It'll be great to see Lou come up and finally meet him. I've talked to him a fair few times on the phone, but it should be good to meet him. I actually met Carmody in Perth a couple of times now, and he's been a wealth of information for us, but unfortunately he's too ill to make it up. But it should be a great day.
And his stories will live on in the Kununurra Historical Society Museum. Andrew, lovely to speak with you today. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Andrew Barker, he's the treasurer of the Kununurra Historical Society, and next Sunday in the afternoon they're going to officially unveil what's left of the Wirraway that crash landed on the mudflats north of the town. In fact, this happened before Kununurra was even built, and it was in 1942 when the Wirraway lost power and had to belly flop into the mudflats. They've managed to salvage what's left 62 odd years later, and that'll be unveiled next week. There'll be the official reception for invited guests at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and then open to the public from 2, so make sure you go along.
Was there any of the wheels left?
There was one there, all intact. Well,
Was it the main wheel or the tail wheel?
No, main wheel, because the other one's gone, and you can see where the steel for the other one was. So I'll show you on the video.
Did you get it?
No, because it's just, well, I don't know. It's not really salvageable, if you know what I mean. It'll all fall apart.
Yeah.
The tyre's intact, but not, half intact sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's,
no sign of the tail wheel?
no. I've got, things probably went over the years.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, there was a couple of things we found out of the wreck which didn't seem to fit. Well, I mean, they might have. There was a broken beer bottle.
No.
Wouldn't have been from you fellas. I didn't
Not
think
us,
so.
no.
I've heard about your forays into Wyndham, but I don't think it was on the return journey, was it?
What's that?
No, I remember you telling me about your forays into Wyndham on other occasions.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah. No, we didn't have any beer.
okay.
Found another one of the cockpit struts. This piece. There's the crash. It was way over there. And that little inlet. Half sticking out, half buried.
We had a good weekend. We got out there again, and Mario Kolk, who's a conservator archivist who's visiting from Holland, Mario and I ended up going back out again on Friday night just gone. We figured it's the last opportunity because it's going to start raining. In fact, it did, and some people got trapped out there this weekend.
That'd be right.
So we got out there and got back Friday and back on Saturday evening. So it was successful. We found another piece of the canopy over on the shoreline. We found bits of the perspex from the windows kilometres away, blown by the wind.
And run by the tides.
Yeah, absolutely. We figured that the canopy, a piece of mangrove wood, had wedged itself in between all three of them and actually lifted it and moved it about 20 feet away from where it originally would have been.
Yeah.
And so we managed to retrieve the canopy and probably 90% of the pieces, including the half circle that the machine gun would run on in the back, like a track.
That was ring.
Yeah, half ring.
Yes.
That would be the machine gun track,
Yeah.
would it? Okay.
Past this island, down to Clean Skin. This is where they walked. And walked, and walked, and walked. The edge of Wirraway Island. And we've come across a bit of a high spot on the marsh, which there and over there could be where the fellas camped. We're about halfway to Clean Skin.
There was also a rock there which seemed out of place. Like you guys wouldn't have picked up a rock somewhere along the line that you had just sitting in the aircraft?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay.
Where was the rock?
Well, amongst the wreckage, and there are no rocks anywhere near it. Do you know what I mean?
Not us.
Okay. Somebody else has dropped it. Unless it could even be something that's turned into what looks like rock.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because, I mean, there's so much change that's happened.
Yes. We went into Ningbing.
It's a fair hike to Ningbing from Clean Skin too, on horseback, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Would have taken a good day.
Well, yes. And we had flying boots. You couldn't get your feet in the stirrups. And we weren't horsemen. I got thrown a big black stallion through me on the way.
Yeah.
This big watty, the head stockman, he had this big black stallion. And it looked so comfortable when he rode it.
Yeah.
I'm riding this other damn thing, and it was legs hanging over the side. It was no good, so I said to old Charlie, how about I use that? Oh, he wouldn't like it. I'll bugger him. I'll have it. See? So he reluctantly gave me this thing. So we're all moving along, and I had to get off for a call of nature, and I got off and got back on again, and everything had moved up, the pack mules and everything had moved up by that time, and I just touched him gently, and he set forth, and he got a little harder and a little harder. We went through the mules, and I tried to pull him back, and then he took it and went. And the last minute he was running between trees to try and wipe me off.
Yeah.
And I'm lying out on the top of him, and these two stockmen ran either side of it, and they came in and jumped the horses across his path and blocked.
Right.
And he propped and went sideways, and I kept going straight ahead. Hit a tree and
crikey.
Yeah, but never mind.